Welcome to this explainer on the 6 money milestones. You know, if you look at your standard personal finance graphs, wealth always looks like this perfectly smooth upward curve, right? Just steadily rising over time. But as our source material actually reveals, that's a total illusion. True wealth literally never arrives gradually. Instead, our financial lives move in lurches. We have these long, grinding stretches interrupted by brief, explosive windows where just everything shifts. So today, we are going to explore the 6 specific, clearly defined financial milestones that actually determine whether you end up wealthy or, well, broke.
To really understand why this matters, let's look at a quick comparison. On the left, we have Rich Richard. He's a 31-year-old graphic designer making $62,000 a year. On the right, we've got Poor Peter, a 38-year-old software contractor pulling in $115,000 a year. Now, common sense tells us Peter is definitely the wealthier guy, right? I mean, look at the income. But fast forward 7 years, and their net worths are going to look completely different from what you'd predict based on those numbers. Why? Because income simply does not equal wealth. Milestones do. And the exact order you hit them in matters vastly more than the size of your paycheck.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap and the specific architecture for today's explainer. We'll start by looking at the income illusion, then move into foundation and ignition. Next up is dropping the debt backpack, followed closely by the compounding engine. Then we'll wrap the whole thing up with the true freedom ratio, and finally, your financial action plan.
Part 1. The income illusion. Why math matters less than milestones.
Moving on to Part 2. Foundation and ignition, the first 2 crucial steps. So the absolute core concept to grasp before we get into the weeds here is that wealth building relies heavily on human psychology. It's about hitting specific targets in the correct sequential order. Milestone number 1, saving exactly 6 months of living expenses in cash. And I mean highly accessible cash, not locked up in a brokerage account. Look, I know this sounds a bit like eating your financial vegetables, but the source points out something brilliant here. This milestone, it's not actually about the money. It's entirely about what the money does to your brain. Without a cash buffer, literally every financial decision you make is contaminated by fear. You avoid investing because, well, losing 15% in the market when you only have $800 in your checking account feels like a literal threat to your survival. With more than half the country operating without even a basic 3-month foundation, building wealth becomes impossible. The psychology just doesn't hold up. To see this play out in real life, let's go back to Richard. He spent 11 months saving $500 a month to build an $18,000 cash buffer. Peter, making nearly double what Richard makes, just completely skipped this step. He figured his next paycheck would always be there to save him. But then, boom, a slow month at work and an unexpected car repair hit at the exact same time. Peter had to put a $4,000 bill on a credit card at a punishing 22% interest rate. That single, desperate decision completely derailed his compounding. Meanwhile, Richard's super boring savings account removed desperation from his life entirely. It gave him a rock-solid psychological foundation. Okay, milestone number 2 is reaching $10,000 of invested capital. And notice I said the word invested because saving just means your money exists, right? Investing means your money actually goes to work. $10,000 is this incredible psychological ignition point where your money finally starts to feel real. Think about it. If you invest $2,000 and get a 10% return, you make $200. Hey, that's mathematically nice, but it doesn't really change your life or your behavior. But a 10% return on $10,000, that's $1,000. That's a rent payment for a lot of people. It's a number large enough that your brain finally registers it as real income generated by something totally separate from your own time and labor. But here's the catch. Getting to that first $10,000 is incredibly tough. The source material actually defines the journey from 0 to 10K as the motivation desert, and it is a grueling zone. The effects of compounding are practically invisible here, and your portfolio is way too fragile to survive an emergency. Because it's so demotivating to look at, the only reliable, mechanical way to safely cross this desert is through automated contributions. The people who successfully cross this milestone, they aren't necessarily more disciplined than you or me. Nope, they're just more automated. Let's look at Part 3, dropping the debt backpack, reclaiming your future labor. All right, milestone 3 is becoming completely debt-free, excluding a mortgage if you have one. Now, you will constantly hear people argue that mathematically, it makes more sense to invest your money than to pay off low-interest debt. But spreadsheets vastly underestimate the psychological weight of owing people money. Debt is a psychological anchor, period. Every single dollar you owe is a dollar of your future labor that has already been sold to someone else. If you're paying, say, $1,500 a month towards student loans at a car payment, that is $18,000 a year servicing your past decisions instead of building your future. When we compare our two guys again, Richard aggressively attacked his student loans. He cleared $32,000 in just 2 years. And the best part? Once they were paid off, he took that exact same monthly payment and redirected it straight into his investments. He boosted his savings rate overnight without needing a single paylays. Peter, on the other hand, is just cruising along making minimum payments. He's bleeding out $170 a month in pure credit card interest. Over a decade, that single lingering balance will cost him over $20,000 in interest alone. And get this, that's $20,000 that could have compounded to over $43,000 if he had just invested it instead.
Moving right along to part 4, the compounding engine, hitting operational velocity. Now, what's really interesting about this next slide is that we are hitting the mathematical turning point of this whole explainer. Milestone 4 is hitting $100,000 in total net worth. The legendary investor Charlie Munger famously said that the first $100,000 is the hardest, and he was being purely mathematical about it. This is the milestone where your relationship with money fundamentally changes forever, and your portfolio genuinely starts pulling its own weight.
The math behind this is just staggering. Check this out. If you invest a consistent $500 a month at a 7% return, the journey from $0 to $100,000 takes roughly 11 years. It's a grind. But the journey from $100,000 to $200,000, that takes only 5.5 years. It literally takes half the time with the exact same amount of effort. Your compounding base is now so phenomenally large that the stock market itself is actually doing way more of the heavy lifting than your actual labor is. But this is precisely where people make a catastrophic error. They hit $100,000, they suddenly feel wealthy, and they completely inflate their lifestyle. At this stage, Richard does something beautifully counterintuitive. Upon crossing $100K, he actually increased his investment rate by 2%. Peter, however, felt pretty flush with cash, so he upgraded his apartment by $700 a month and leased a flashy new car for $550. Pulling that $1,250 a month out of his system right as his compounding engine reached operational velocity caused his net worth to actually dip. He literally forced himself to cross the 100K milestone twice. That single bout of lifestyle inflation cost Peter $350,000 in lost future wealth by the time he hits age 55. Ouch. Let's look at part 5, the true freedom ratio, when money outworks you. We are now entering milestone 5, which I'd argue is the most important, yet somehow the least talked about stage of the entire wealth-building journey. Milestone 5 is the crossover point. It's defined as the exact moment when your portfolio's annual investment growth actually exceeds the amount of money you personally contribute from your paycheck each year. This is a massive, massive psychological and mathematical shift. It's the moment wealth-building transitions from being something you do to something that is just happening to you. Here is exactly how that math plays out in the real world. Around year 10, if you contribute $12,000 annually, your portfolio's 7% growth might only yield about $11,600. So your labor is still the main engine driving the train. But by year 11, the portfolio is larger. A 7% return now produces $13,200, which finally exceeds your own $12,000 contribution. Richard, who diligently followed all the milestones in order, hits this magical crossover point at age 42. Peter, burdened by all that debt and a severely delayed start, is pushed out until his mid-50s, and honestly, that's if he ever reaches it at all.
And that brings us to milestone 6, the year your passive income fully covers your baseline expenses. Here is the absolute crucial point. Financial freedom is not some massive Scrooge McDuck vault of cash sitting in a bank somewhere. It's not. It is simply a ratio, and it's based entirely on your baseline expenses. It's the ultimate denominator plot twist of this whole explainer. The fastest path to financial freedom isn't actually maximizing your income, it's aggressively minimizing the number your portfolio needs to replace.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what I mean. Richard keeps his non-negotiable baseline expenses at $3,200 a month. Using the classic 4% rule, he only needs a $960,000 portfolio to be completely 100% financially free. Working literally becomes optional for him in his late 40s. Peter's baseline, heavily bloated by years and years of lifestyle inflation, sits at $7,800 a month. Because of that, he requires a massive $2.3 million portfolio just to survive. So even though Peter earns almost double Richard's salary, Richard achieves true freedom 15 to 20 years earlier simply because he kept his denominator low. Finally, Part 6, Your Financial Action Plan. Steps to start today.
All right, here is your homework. These are the 6 chronological steps you need to build your very own wealth roadmap starting today. Step 1, calculate your exact baseline monthly non-negotiable expenses. Step 2, save exactly 6 months of those expenses in cash immediately. Step 3, automate your investments until you cross that brutal $10,000 motivation desert. Put it on autopilot. Step 4, list all your non-mortgage debts and aggressively eliminate them. Step 5, rigorously check your lifestyle inflation. If you're nearing that 100K mark, hold the line. Do not upgrade the car. And step 6, multiply your baseline monthly expenses by 300 to find your exact, concrete freedom number.
Literally everything else you hear out there about building wealth is just noise. True wealth is not built on a high income. It's built on methodically passing these specific milestones in order. So I want to leave you with one final, very provocative question to reflect on today. Out of these 6 milestones, which one are you heading toward right now? And are you actually doing it on purpose? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep focusing on your roadmap.